What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with Cover Crimson, back with another live show. Appreciate all you guys for being here. Let's talk a little bit about the NCAA and some of the things that they want to try to enforce to prevent people from transferring, or I wouldn't even call it transferring, changing schools post spring. Not really entering the transfer portal, but more so taking the Xavier Lucas route, who was a defensive back for Wisconsin this past season. After the transfer portal window had closed, he elected to unenroll from Wisconsin, enroll at Miami. And while Wisconsin did sue Miami because, he had a contract at Wisconsin, nothing was ever really enforced as far as his ability to play. And he ended up being a starter for the national champion runner-up. So we're trying to prevent that, or at least the NCAA is trying to prevent that. So that's something that we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be talking about some of y'all's questions. I gave you guys the opportunity on Twitter to ask. We're going to be getting to the comments, and certainly if you want to have a comment or a question addressed, just hit us with a super chat. That guarantees it, but I will also be addressing y'all's comments when I have time. But I did get a couple of questions that I wanted to talk about, including the most intriguing spring practice battles, position battles. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Once again, thank you guys so much for being here. Let's get started with the NCAA Oversight Committee. They made an announcement earlier after a couple of days of meetings that they were going to try to do three things to prevent the post-spring movement of players. And those three things are going to be, or the thought that they think they're going to try to do, is that the head coach would be prohibited from all football, recruiting and on-field coaching, and administrative duties, team meetings, etc., for 6 contests, meaning anything dealing with recruiting or on-field coaching, or anything regarding off-field stuff like team meetings and all of that, for 6 games, 6 contests, that coach would not be able to participate. The school would be fined 20% of its football budget. So, I mean, I don't know if that would be the $20 million. And, well, I guess no, that wouldn't be the NIL side of things. That would be the actual football budget. But that's obviously a huge chunk of money. And then the school would be required to reduce the number of roster spots by 5 for the following season, regardless of the head coach's employment at the school. Now, that one is almost useless to me because now you have 105 scholarship spots available. And so if you reduce that number, you have 100. But even like a place like Alabama, have they even touched 100 at this point? I don't think so. So, I mean, that one's kind of, I get it, throw it in there. But here's what the NCAA is trying to do. Instead of going after the student athlete, which has not fared well for them in the courts, they're attempting to go after the schools and the coaches and punish them for accepting said players. Now, granted, there's going to be some pushback. There's already been some pushback, but there absolutely will be lawsuits if they try to do this. Some people will argue that it violates antitrust laws. Not really sure if this holds up in court or not. But, I think the argument will more so be what's not. Well, first of all, the argument from the student athlete side is that it restricts their ability for movement to go from school to school. Now, I think from the other side of it, the argument would be, well, it's not really restricting. If you want to unenroll and then enroll somewhere else, you're absolutely free to do that as far as educational purposes, like to get an education. You just won't be able to participate, or it could limit your ability to participate in the football side of it. So they're not really telling you that you can't do that, but they're saying that the coach and the school will face stiff penalties should they accept a student who does that. Very confusing stuff. I understand that there are probably layers of this that I don't understand. And so definitely wanted to put that out there. Here's the biggest takeaway from me with all of this stuff going on right now, with the NCAA, oversight committee and all of that. It kind of confirms what we all have suspected, which is that there's going to be a second, I wouldn't call it a transfer portal window, but a second period where you're going to see movement, and in fact, probably quite a bit of movement, where student athletes are going to take this Xavier Lucas route, unenroll in a school, and then pick a new school, enroll there, join the football team, and then be available immediately for competition. So the NCAA is trying to head this off. They understand it's going to be a problem. They understand that once they let it happen, essentially once with Xavier Lucas, it really opened up the door for other student athletes to do this moving forward, and that they probably suspect that there is going to be pretty significant movement. Otherwise, they wouldn't really worry about this. So that is my biggest takeaway. A lot of people are going to talk about, they're going to argue, are they able to do it? Are they not able to do it? I'll leave that up to the courts. I like the fact that they're trying to be proactive. I think that this is by far the best route they could try to take, is to go after the school and the head coach rather than the athlete. But there will be arguments made. We'll let that stuff play out in court. But as of right now, hopefully, I guess the NCAA, maybe it slows down the number of players who attempt this. Maybe it's to slow down the process and not completely stop it. I mean, antitrust laws, like, they've got to do something on that front. I just don't really see any way around it. The way that this is going to be argued, it's all restrictive to the student athlete. I don't agree with it. Or I guess from a legal standpoint, I guess I would have to agree with it. I'm not studied up enough to be able to have a judgment one way or another. I hate that we're at this point. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's gotten ridiculous, because what you're going to start seeing, or what you've seen and will continue to see, is just people continue to push the envelope. Like, who's to say that someone 3 games in the next season decides, you know what, I'm not the starting quarterback. Let me pull myself out. I guess the academic calendar would be the only thing to deter that. And then maybe, I mean, even at that point, would you push back and say, well, do I even have to be enrolled in the school really to participate? Like, I'm just saying that there's a lot of arguments being made right now. It's reached an absurd point. They have to do something about it. I will give the NCAA a sliver of credit here for trying to be creative. We'll just have to wait and see if it actually ends up leading to anything. At this point, it's not making me think, oh, great, now I'm not worried about players leaving following the spring. I think everything's going to be fine. This is going to deter everybody. I don't think that at all. So we'll have to wait and see how it ends up playing out. But, that's something that's a small bit of this conversation. Just wanted to touch on that a little bit, because a lot of people have questions. And once again, all this did for me is confirm we're going to see movement post-spring. To what extent, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully, nothing big from Alabama's side. Hopefully, they don't lose anybody. But if people end up leaving, or even if they don't leave, if this becomes a thing at any school, Alabama could always try to fill some voids, some problem areas. And what I will say is Alabama didn't lose anybody in the spring transfer portal window last year, right? So even if that is available, as long as Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, they're still going hard as far as that quarterback battle, and it's really not leaning one way or another. Maybe some of these other positions where there's battles going on, you might see somebody. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but everybody during the spring last year started to really buy in to the program. And so hopefully they're able to do the same. It would be nice in some ways if they didn't lose anybody through this back channel avenue, and then maybe if they could add a quality piece or two. Don't know if that'll happen. Don't even know if they have the resources at this point, or have they exhausted all of their NIL and things like that. But it's at least something to look at on that front. All right, let's get into some of these questions that you guys had. And then if you got any comments or whatever, certainly let us know, and we will try to get those answered. Curious Learning, he said, I'm wondering if we've ever had a greener roster than the one we'll have in 2026. Consider this: 1, overall team age; 2, number of starts; 3, number of snaps; 4, number of quality snaps in contestable games versus Power 4 competition; 5, statistical production; and 6, time spent under current position coach, etc. Scary. Well, what I will say is that last point, from a coaching staff perspective, you lost your quarterbacks coach, but really, granted, the quarterbacks did have a great relationship with Nick Sheridan. The guy who's calling plays at least is still intact. Obviously, you had Brian Ellis, who was on the staff but coaching a completely different position. Now he's your quarterback's coach. And so you've added two new position coaches on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, you return everybody, right? I haven't really seen anything significant on that side. And not only that, you are getting both your offensive and defensive coordinators back. That's encouraging. That's something that, Nick Saban certainly dealt with that issue at various points as far as losing either one coordinator or both coordinators, having to break in new play callers, getting comfortable, knowing what you're going to get. From a play calling perspective on both sides, you're getting some continuity. I don't think that's nothing. I think that that's at least worth mentioning. Now, to get to your question, it is probably one of the greenest rosters I've ever seen. Yeah. I mean, you have no quarterback with any sort of significant experience other than Austin Mack has spent multiple years in the system, and he has about a half of football that he played against a college football playoff team, the national champions in Indiana. That's valuable experience, don't get me wrong, but that's a half. I mean, that's pretty much all you got there. At running back, yeah, you have like guys like Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley, but A.K. Deere has very little experience. And Xavier Crowell, the guy who we're all expecting to get into the mix at running back, zero experience, being a high school player just this past season. So it's either going to be guys, if I'm predicting A.K. Deere and Xavier Crowell to be the top two running backs, which I currently am, it's a projection. It could work out in a number of different ways. But if that ends up being the case, that's two very inexperienced running backs. I mean, you are returning Ryan Williams. You're returning Lottie Brooks. Both of those two guys have some experience. Caleb Edwards has some experience at tight end. Your offensive line's pretty much new. I mean, you did lose Josh Cuevas at tight end, by the way. Your featured piece, your top tight end, but at least you have a guy who's got some starts. Offensive line's pretty much brand new. Defensive line in a lot of ways, pretty brand new, especially with the starters. You lost some of your depth as far as Wolf. Second level, you lose your top three guys. Secondary is really the only spot on the roster where across the board they've returned all of their starters or pretty much all of their starters or all of their key pieces on the back half of the defense. That's that's a lot of turnover, a ton of turnover. And so that's why a lot of us have pointed to 2027 and said, well, hopefully they're able to keep this group intact for the most part, and they're able to get the experience that they need in 2026. Doesn't mean that you have to punt 2026, and just pretty much say, well, we're going to be green. We're not going to be able to, go as far as we want to. It is going to be some growing pain. There are going to be some growing pains, though. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Ideal weight. So Cameron Criticos, I hope I said that last name correct. Ideal weight for Xavier Griffin this year, given his positional versatility. And then he also asked, freshman most likely to start week 1 mid-season. So for Xavier Griffin, for me, I think if he can get anywhere between 230 and 235, I think that's a complete home run. I would love him at that weight. I think from an off-ball perspective, from an on-ball perspective. Now, granted, that's as a true freshman. I would feel really comfortable with him actually seeing significant snaps if he was anywhere 230 or above. 225, I don't think it would be terrible by any means. I would have some questions, especially as an edge player. But a guy like Deontay Lawson, he was getting plenty of edge snaps or getting opportunities on the line of scrimmage. And we all know that while he was listed, I think, at 228, I mean, he looked rail thin this past season after the knee injury. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he was 225. Not as long as Xavier Griffin by any means. So obviously Griffin would be a little leaner at 225 pounds. But I think that 225 would be kind of the bare minimum for me. And I think that's very doable considering he's already 218 pounds and it's still in February. But anything 230 plus I think would be great. And 240 plus is amazing, whether it be from an off-ball perspective or playing him on the ball. That gets you up in the Wolf range. Justin Hill, 242 pounds. Quay Russaw this past season, 241 pounds. A guy like Jan Zapier has played anywhere from about 242 pounds to this past season at 248 pounds. So that would certainly put him in that range, and I would be completely fine with it. That is ideal in my opinion. Would love it if he could get there. Now, to answer your second question, the freshman most likely to start in week 1 and then mid-season. So I went ahead and kind of put together a list of different guys who could end up starting. The I guess, what is it, 5 players that I have listed, the best opportunities to start, in my opinion, would be Xavier Crowell, Jamarian Matthews, Cedarian Morgan, Jira Edwards, and Xavier Griffin. Now, a lot of that to the top of your depth chart players, that shouldn't be overly surprising. But considering the opportunities at running back, considering the fact that I'm looking at Bandit and I have no idea, first of all, who's even going to play there, but much less who's going to start, that could create an opportunity for Jamarian Matthews. And I guess you could probably include Nolan Wilson in there as well. But then, as far as who's going to be wide receiver 3, they're probably going to start the season in 11 personnel. So I wouldn't expect Cedarian Morgan to start over Ryan Williams or Lottie Brooks. But as far as being a starter, if he was viewed as that wide receiver 3, competing with Noah Rogers and Rico Scott and Derek Meadows, I mean, I don't think it's crazy if Cedarian Morgan ended up being an early starter for Alabama. But then Jira Edwards, could he uproot a Red Morgan to start at Husky? I think early on that'd probably be pretty difficult. But when you start talking midseason, I love Red Morgan, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he remained Alabama starting Husky for the entirety of 2026. But I also love the talent of Jira Edwards, and it almost feels like Red's got to bring it each and every week. And he does, from an energy standpoint. It will never be a lack of effort from Red Morgan. From a coverage standpoint, I do think there are some limitations. And so if he's struggling for whatever reason and they can get not only the same type of impact or pretty close as far as the run defending and the triggering downhill and doing all those things, blitzing off, the edge, if they're getting all of that pretty much from Jira Edwards, and he also offers more ability as a cover guy, then I could see him uprooting Red Morgan there at Husky. Not predicting it, saying I could see it. And then Xavier Griffin, once again, a lot of that depends on the frame and the weight. What does he check in at by the time the season starts? But he would be kind of a dark horse. I know you asked for the freshman most likely. I think the most likely at this point would be Xavier Crowell. Not going to predict it necessarily. They do have some talent, but I do think there's a pretty clear path. I know there's very high expectations for him coming from, the staff. They expect big things from him, and they feel like he's going to be able to handle it. So I wouldn't completely rule out Xavier Crowell. All right, let's get to the Herb and Raj podcast question. Great group of guys there, man. Love both of those guys. So they said, outside of quarterback, what position battle intrigues you the most? And for me, once again, I'll probably take the route of let's just go ahead and talk about all of the position battles. And then I'll choose which one intrigues me the most. So you do have that quarterback battle. That's going to obviously be the one that everybody talks about. But left tackle between Jackson Lloyd and Javen James, that's really intriguing to me. I know that Jimmy right now, he's kind of leaning, I think, Javen James with the experience, especially coming in the SEC for Mississippi State this past season. But I believe the coaching staff loves Jackson Lloyd. I love the talent, and I certainly think that he is more than capable of winning the starting left tackle job over Javen James. I need to see more consistency from James. Now, granted, I've seen next to nothing from Lloyd, so there's not really a whole lot to compare it to. So maybe I'm looking at James and I'm comparing what I know, which has not been great. It hasn't been awful. It's serviceable, but I think there's some up and downs. And a guy who's especially much older compared to Jackson Lloyd, who I know nothing about. And maybe I'm just assuming that he's going to be able to continue to grow into this player that we all expected him to be when he signed with Alabama as a top 50 recruit. That's one that really intrigues me because I think left tackle is important. It's your blindside protector. Both tackle spots are pretty important, but obviously Michael Carroll, at least right now, he seems to have the right tackle job on lock. Linebacker, off-ball linebacker, certainly an intriguing battle. You're talking about QB Reese. You're talking about Caleb Woodson, Luke Metz, Caden Jones, and possibly even a guy like Xavier Griffin. I guess you could put, Duke Johnson and Abdul Sanders in there as well. Don't want to, completely write them off. But I think right now those top 4 guys would be the ones I would be focusing on the most. And who do I think would win that battle as of right now? I originally said Luke Metz and QB Reese. Still think it's probably going to be QB Reese. I love Luke Metz, but Caleb Woodson, I can't argue that they targeted him early in the transfer portal window, got him secured, and the talent, the length, the athleticism, it all not only fits the defense, but it's super intriguing. So I wouldn't want to rule him out. Center is going to be another one between Racing Delgatti and Caden Strayhorn. Also, I guess you could throw Mal Waldrop into that mix. I lean Racing Delgatti. I think he's one of the most underrated additions that any SEC team had along its offensive line. Does he have things he needs to work on? Yes, he needs to get stronger, probably needs to get a little bit bigger. He's 300 pounds, so it's not terrible. But I think, with the way that he plays, probably needs to be closer to 305, 307, 308, 310, somewhere in that range. Right now, he's, 300. It's okay. But he needs to get stronger, needs to be able to anchor a little bit better, needs to be a little bit more consistent as far as the movement off the football, but the athleticism is certainly there. I think he plays with that grittiness and that nastiness that you look for. But if Alabama wants to go with more of the physical approach, the guy who's more physically ready to kind of be more of a mauler in the run game, then maybe Caden Strayhorn might be the direction they end up taking there. Or Mal Waldrop, who I'm extremely high on. I can see him playing guard or center. Next up on the list is RB1, which we've already talked about a little bit, but we've talked about all those players are probably not worth diving into. I currently think that the top two guys will end up being Xavier Crowell and A.K. Deere, but I still think you'll see Daniel Hill, and maybe you still see a splash of Kevin Riley every once in a while. Tight end 2 is another one I'm intrigued by. That's one that we're probably not talking about enough. We know based off of how things played out last year, we know based off of what the coaching staff thinks about Caleb Edwards, he's going to be your tight end 1. That would be my guess at least. I would be floored if he wasn't, especially having an entire offseason in the strength and conditioning program, learning the playbook or mastering the playbook at this point, and then just continuing to get more and more comfortable. I think he's going to be one of the better tight ends in the SEC, even as a second-year player. I'm really high on Caleb Edwards. But who ends up starting alongside him when they're in those 12 personnel packages? Is it Josh Ford? Is it Danny Lewis? Is it Marshall Pritchett? Possibly Jay Lindsey. But then you got Max Sutter, the true freshman, who's also in that mix or going to be in that mix as well. I've been very vocal in my love for Josh Ford. At one time, I was extremely high on Danny Lewis as well. So you never know when he does become that player. He was expected to at least be some version of that player this past season, but injuries obviously derailed, his ability to be on the field, especially consistently. I still remain a big Marshall Pritchett fan. It could depend on what they think about Caleb Edwards. If they're viewing him more, or it could also depend on what they're looking to get out of that tight end too. If they want, when they go 12 personnel, they want big bodies. They want guys who can move people, whether it be on the perimeter or, on or near the line of scrimmage. You might see the combination of Josh Ford and Caleb Edwards, 264 pounds, 265 pounds, both long, both big, and both are pretty physical. If they view more so Caleb Edwards as like a move tight end still, maybe he doesn't make or take the necessary step as far as the inline work and being that big physical blocker, maybe they keep him as more of a move guy, and allow him to, improve on that front. That doesn't take as much from a physical toll as playing inline. In that instance, I think Josh Ford or Danny Lewis would be the primary options to play inline. But if they like Caleb Edwards as more of that inline player, it could be Josh Ford. I think he does play that move position pretty well, but you could also see Marshall Pritchett. And there's the outside possibility that you could see Max Sutter as well. But that's one I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And then wide receiver 3 would be the final one. Between Noah Rogers and Rico Scott, Derek Meadows, and Sadarian Morgan, I could see any of those players emerging as wide receiver 3. Noah Rogers is going to be the automatic assumption, and I totally get it. And I like the talent. I don't want to write him off at all. I mean, from a production standpoint, we haven't seen a whole lot from him yet. We did see him at we didn't really see him at Ohio State. And then he was a guy who was somewhat productive for NC State for 2 seasons, but he was around 400 yards receiving, nothing crazy. But at the same time, Jimmy Bernard, if you go back and look, I guess he had similar numbers at Washington, but he also had first and second round draft picks, 3 of them ahead of him on the depth chart. So it's a little bit different. But that's going to be another one that I'm keeping an eye on. No doubt about it. But that's just, right now, that's what I would say. I'm trying to look. I don't know if are we able to comment? Did I screw something up? Do we screw something up? Because we're not getting any. And that's fun. If no one really has anything to say, no problem at all. Just want to make sure that you have the ability. I don't even know if y'all could let me know if you couldn't. Let's see. We're going to test this. We'll see if it pops up. I got on my personal. We'll see. Sorry about that. It's just we're not getting any comments. That's strange. So we'll see. All right. Anyways, we are getting close to wrapping this up. We're not going to go super long today. Just wanted to address some of those questions, some of y'all's questions. And I think that as we get closer to spring practice, the more that we're going to be talking about specific players, sleepers, guys who could end up emerging. I do want to focus a little bit on the lower rated freshmen who has the best chance as far as getting involved in some of these competitions, because I wouldn't write off. There's actually a couple of guys I wouldn't completely write off. But we'll be doing all of that as we get closer to fall camp. We're going to be continuing on tomorrow with the roster rankings. Got several of those players that I want to talk about. We'll also be getting Richard Hendricks back on for his second episode of the week. Really excited about having him involved, covering the basketball side. Alabama plays Mississippi State this evening, so we'll be able to get his reaction to that, and also start talking about the NCAA tournament and some of the other hot topics surrounding college basketball. So we are getting comments, so that's good. I don't know that we've ever gone, because it's been a pretty healthy amount of people in here, but we've never gone this long without having comments. So that's very strange. But Kim, appreciate you being here. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up because we've already put out 2 episodes. Jimmy and I would definitely recommend go checking those out. We talked about the 2027 running backs and how they could potentially fit into the room. We talked about the offensive line and the inexperience there. 2 kind of deep dives a little bit. So thank you guys again for hopping on. I appreciate you guys so much. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then also get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.